What if the real danger wasn't out there, but inside you? Not in the strangers you distrust or the manipulators you fear, but in your own heart. At the exact moment when your empathy begins to twist into something darker. This is the paradox Jung pointed to when he spoke of the shadow. The hidden part of us that does not disappear just because we deny it. In fact, the more we repress it, the more it grows, feeding itself in silence until it finds a way to act through us. Empathy is often celebrated as the purest human gift, the ability to feel another's pain, to walk inside their world without judgment. It heals, it comforts, it builds bridges. But Jung would remind us nothing in the psyche is purely light. Every strength, if left unconscious, has its shadow, and empathy is no exception. There comes a moment when the ability to sense others stops being a blessing and begins to feel like a weapon. You notice you can read people too easily. You see their fears, their cracks, their hidden wounds. And somewhere inside you, a whisper arises. What if I used this? Not to heal, but to gain, to control, or to protect yourself. That whisper is the shadow speaking through your empathy. Carl Jung warned that the shadow is not evil in itself. It is raw potential, unintegrated energy. But when empathy fuses with shadow, it becomes something uncanny, a double-edged gift. You can console with one hand and crush with the other. You can liberate someone with truth or devastate them with the very same truth. This is the territory of the dark empath, a figure who feels deeply but whose depth is no longer innocent. They stand at the threshold between healer and manipulator, between guide and trickster. And here lies the danger. If you do not recognize these changes within yourself, you risk being overtaken by them. That is why this video exists. Not to frighten you, but to warn you, because the line is thin and many cross it without even knowing. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So let us make it conscious. Let us bring into the light the 5 signs that reveal you may be becoming a dark empath. 5 psychological patterns that seem subtle at first, but once seen, cannot be unseen. The first is the simplest, yet most dangerous. You detect vulnerabilities without effort. The second, your care begins to blur into control. The third, you mirror the shadows of others back to them. The fourth, your charisma takes on a darker edge, making people both drawn to and afraid of you. And finally, the temptation arrives to use your empathy as power. By the end, you will see why none of this is destiny. Darkness is not a curse, but a mirror. The problem is not the shadow itself, but living in denial of it. But first, let us look at the opening sign, the one that begins quietly, almost invisibly, your uncanny ability to see where others are weak. You sit across from someone, and without them saying a word, you already know. You sense the slight hesitation in their tone, the way their eyes avoid a subject, the subtle stiffness in their shoulders. Most people would miss it, but to you, it is obvious. Vulnerabilities reveal themselves like cracks in glass, and you cannot unsee them. At first, this feels like a gift. You can be the friend who notices when someone is struggling. You can offer comfort no one else thinks to give. You can create intimacy where others only skim the surface. People trust you, sometimes more than they should. But Jung would warn, when the unconscious gives you access to another person's hidden material, you are not only gifted, You are burdened because the shadow within you now holds knowledge it may want to use. Vulnerability is power. To see it is to be tempted by it. Why does this happen? Jung explained that empaths are already in touch with the collective unconscious, the shared reservoir of human emotion and memory. But when the shadow fuses with empathy, the empath becomes attuned not just to feelings, but to wounds. You sense where others are broken because, at some level, you have met those fractures within yourself. Here lies the danger. You may begin to lean on this power in ways you do not admit. Perhaps you cut deeper in arguments, hitting the exact nerve that will silence someone. Perhaps you steer conversations toward the topics that make people open up, not for their sake, but to gain leverage. Or perhaps you say nothing at all, but quietly carry their secrets, knowing you could break them if you wished. This is the first mark of the dark empath, the effortless detection of vulnerability. What once was a bridge of compassion becomes a map of weaknesses, and the map is intoxicating. The cliffhanger is this. Once you see these vulnerabilities, what will you do with them? Will you honor the gift and hold them safely? Or will you let the shadow whisper that these cracks are keys and you are free to use them? Because the moment you believe you can cross that line without consequence, you have already stepped onto the path of the dark empath. Imagine holding a scalpel. In the hands of a surgeon, it saves lives. In the hands of someone careless, it cuts deeper than intended. Empathy works the same way. At its best, you use it to heal, to understand, to nurture, to soothe. But once your shadow begins to awaken, you may notice something unsettling. The same sensitivity that heals can also control. This shift is rarely deliberate at first. You care for someone and they open up to you. They feel relief. But you also notice, with every confession, with every piece of their soul they hand you, they become more dependent. Their decisions start leaning on your approval. Their emotions begin to orbit around your reactions. Suddenly, you are no longer just helping, you are steering. Jung described the shadow as that part of ourselves we do not wish to see. Here, the shadow takes the form of subtle dominance. Because beneath the care, a part of you wants to hold the strings. To heal is noble, but to be needed, that is intoxicating. And so, without meaning to, you begin to blur the line between compassion and control. This is the second sign of becoming a dark empath, the alternation between healer and manipulator. One moment you are the savior, the next the puppeteer. To others, it feels like whiplash. They trust you, then fear you. They open up, then realize you might be shaping them for your own ends. The metaphor Jung might have offered is the archetype of the wounded healer, the one who knows pain so intimately that they can heal, but who may also unconsciously inflict wounds to keep their power alive. The danger is not in helping, but in enjoying the control that comes with it. So you must ask yourself, when you comfort someone, do you secretly enjoy how much influence you hold over them? When you give advice, do you listen for their growth or for the satisfaction of being right? When someone depends on you, do you feel burdened or secretly powerful? This is not judgment, but awareness. Because once you recognize this shift, you can choose differently. But if you deny it, you will find yourself caught in a cycle, alternating between healer and manipulator, unsure of which mask is truly yours. And the longer you live in that cycle, the more dangerous the next sign becomes, when you not only control others, but become the mirror in which their darkest truths are forced to appear. There is a reason some people fear you, even if you have never raised your voice, never acted cruelly. They fear you because when they look at you, they see themselves. Not the polished mask they show the world, but the parts they spend their lives running from. This is the third sign of the dark empath, You mirror the shadow of others back to them. Without trying, you draw out the truth they do not want to face. Someone lies to you, and they feel exposed. Someone hides their weakness, and they sense you see it anyway. Someone wears a false smile, and in your presence, the smile falters. Jung wrote that the meeting with oneself is at first the meeting with one's shadow. But what happens when the meeting is not with themselves, but with you? You become a walking confrontation, a mirror of hidden shame. At first, this seems like a gift of honesty. You help people see who they really are, but it rarely feels like kindness to them. Instead, it can provoke defensiveness, anger, even hatred. They may accuse you of being cruel when all you did was reflect what was already inside them. This is why dark empaths often find themselves both magnetic and despised. People are drawn to the depth of your presence. It feels real, unmasking. Yet the same presence unsettles them. They sense they cannot hide from you, and that terrifies them. Here the danger is subtle. If your shadow is unintegrated, you may begin to enjoy this effect. You may start provoking people deliberately, pushing them into confrontation with themselves, not for their growth, but for your satisfaction. You become the trickster, delighting in the chaos you awaken. And this is why Jung insisted, the shadow must be integrated, not denied. To mirror others unconsciously is to wound. To mirror consciously, with compassion, is to heal. But few stay neutral for long, because the more you reflect, the more you begin to notice another transformation. Your very presence, your energy begins to change. Your charisma no longer feels warm. It carries a darker glow. And that glow can either elevate you or consume you.
Charisma is often seen as a gift of light. People with it inspire, attract, and uplift. But when empathy fuses with shadow, charisma changes its flavor. It no longer feels simply magnetic. It feels magnetic with an undertone of fear. People lean toward you, yet part of them wants to step back. They are fascinated, but unsettled. This is the fourth sign of the dark empath. Your charisma gains a darker resonance. Jung might call it the archetype of the trickster awakening within you. The trickster is not pure villainy. It is cleverness, ambiguity, unpredictability. It charms while it destabilizes. It invites you closer while keeping its true motives hidden. You notice this when your presence alone shifts a room. Conversations bend toward you not because you demand it, but because your energy pulls them in. Yet behind the attraction, there is tension. People sense you could cut as sharply as you could comfort. You could bless, or you could wound, and they cannot quite tell which you will choose. This power is intoxicating. To hold both light and shadow in your aura makes you unforgettable. Some will admire you for your depth. Others will resent you for making them feel small, but all will remember you. The danger, Jung would warn, lies in identification. If you begin to see yourself as this figure, half healer, half trickster, you may unconsciously start performing it. You lean into the mystery, you amplify the magnetism, and slowly, you lose the distinction between who you are and the archetype acting through you. Carrying this kind of energy can isolate you. Friends may drift, unable to relax around you. Lovers may find you irresistible but exhausting. Even strangers may confess they feel seen by you in ways that shake them. The shadow has stepped into your charisma, and once it does, your presence is no longer neutral. But what happens when this aura of power begins whispering a final temptation? What happens when you realize that empathy itself can be turned into an instrument of dominance, not by accident, but by choice? That is the fifth and final sign.
Every gift carries its trial. For the empath, the trial comes when compassion reveals itself not only as connection, but as control. This is the ultimate temptation of the dark empath.
To wield empathy as a form of power. You begin to notice it in small ways. A phrase said at the right moment can calm someone's panic or ignite it. A silence held long enough can make another person confess what they swore to hide. A glance, a sigh, a shift in tone, all of these can bend the atmosphere around you. And once you see this, the question arises, why not use it? Jung warned that the greatest danger of the shadow is possession, when you no longer act through it, but it acts through you. This is the risk here. The moment you allow yourself to test the limits, to see how far you can push, you stop being the one holding power. The shadow begins to hold you. It feels thrilling, even righteous. After all, others have hurt you. Why shouldn't you have the advantage now? But the more you indulge this thought, the more you drift from integration into domination. You begin to justify subtle manipulations. You tell yourself it is for their own good. You minimize the harm because the effect is invisible. But inside, you know. The temptation itself is proof, because the empath's true path was never about power, it was about understanding. To feel the pull toward domination is to stand at the edge of corruption. This is the fifth sign, when empathy stops being a mirror and starts becoming a weapon of will. Some never return from this edge. They surrender to the thrill, and the shadow consumes them. Others pause, recognize the danger, and turn inward to integrate the force instead of being used by it. The cliffhanger is here. Will you allow empathy to become your shadow's instrument, or will you recognize the warning and step back? Because beyond this temptation lies either ruin or transformation.
The 5 signs are not curses. They are mirrors to detect vulnerabilities, to shift between healer and controller, to reflect the shadows of others, to carry charisma tinged with darkness, and to feel the temptation of power. These are not random accidents. They are signals that your empathy has touched the realm of the shadow. And here lies the truth Jung left us. The shadow is not your enemy. The danger is not that you have these impulses. The danger is pretending you do not. Because what we deny becomes stronger. What we repress finds a way to act without our consent. But what we face with awareness can be integrated. A dark empath who refuses consciousness is dangerous, both to themselves and to others. They manipulate without realizing, wound without caring, and live possessed by forces they do not command. But a dark empath who chooses awareness is something else entirely. They become someone capable of holding both the light and the shadow, not in conflict, but in balance. Individuation, Jung taught, is the process of becoming whole, uniting what is above and what is below, what is gentle and what is ruthless. It does not mean denying your ability to cut, but choosing when and why you use it. It does not mean rejecting your charisma, but carrying it without letting it own you. It does not mean avoiding power, but transforming the desire for dominance into the strength of presence. This is the path forward, not to fear the signs, but to read them as invitations. Every time you notice yourself crossing the line, you are being given a chance to step back, to ask, am I healing or am I controlling? Am I mirroring with compassion or with cruelty? Am I acting or is my shadow acting through me? The very fact that you can ask these questions proves something vital. You are not lost.
You are not doomed to become consumed. Recognition is already transformation. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So make it conscious. See the darkness not as a curse, but as the part of yourself that longs to be integrated. That is the real secret of the dark empath. The shadow was never trying to destroy you. It was trying to wake you up. Remember, being a dark empath is not your fate. It is your invitation to hold power without being possessed by it, to feel deeply without being consumed, to integrate shadow and empathy until you stand not divided, but whole. And perhaps that is what the world most needs right now. Not empaths lost in light, nor manipulators lost in shadow, but human beings who dare to hold both.